All right. And so you can see on my agenda for the day is we'll take a look at, continue our study of the First World War, and we'll take a look at what is, the theme for today really is looking at the First World War as a total war. But before we can do that, we got to do a little, kind of like a little debriefing here. Is there any questions before we start the day? All right, to kind of think a little bit about the First World War and connect it with your assignment from yesterday, dealing with the causes, and you should have taken care of that business. I do have a quick little video clip here, and it's very well possible I might have showed this video clip last year in History of the Americas, but I think it's a really good clip here when we talk about the First World War. And you have a group of historians trying to summarize the First World War in one word. All right, so I want you to think about what could be one word that you might describe the First World War. First World War. Tough for me to say. You know, if I go too fast, got to slow it down. All right. So I think about that, right now, and then maybe at the end of our case study on the First World War, maybe we can come with up with a word. All right. So here we go. Got a little video here. Won't take us that long.
If I had to choose one word to describe World War I, it would be cataclysmic.
A single word to describe World War I would be catastrophic.
Transformational, because nothing was the same once the war was over.
I think the one word that helps to describe World War I is destructive.
I would choose the word mistake.
Stupid. That's how I would encapsulate the First World War. World War I did not have to happen. There was no inherent reason. It literally was dumb.
A person during World War I thought they were in a new age, a fascinating modern world, the world that produced the Titanic, aviation, and incredible advances in medicine. It seemed like everything was within grasp right before World War I. And all of these would be smashed on the battlefields of Europe.
From the very beginning of the road to war, to everything that comes out of the war and the peace plans, is not just one mistake, but a series of mistakes. People had the option to choose peace, and time and again seemed to make the wrong decisions.
It was lack of communication. It was intellectual rigidity. It was a simple falling of dominoes that never needed to fall. And so the children of the Renaissance and the Age of Reason and the Enlightenment ended up massacring themselves in the mud and blood of the trenches.
Not just destructive in terms of what happens to men's bodies on the battlefield, destructive in terms of global politics.
The Russian Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the grievous weakening of the British and French empires. The world that existed in 1918 was remarkably different from the one that existed in 1914.
The whole globe was influenced by this war, and the transformational changes cover a wide range from technology and weapons. You see the first tanks, you see the maturation of artillery guns, machine guns, trench warfare. World War I begins the modern era.
So again, looking at just at that little clip here, kind of really is looking at the totalness of the First World War. And you have these variety of historians, and they're giving their interpretations. And again, we simply refer to that as like historiography. They're giving their interpretations, and they're basing it on a set of facts that is relevant to their interpretation. And so that one historian that focuses on the First World War is transformational. I gravitate on that one, and so yeah, I'm going to use that word as well. And that's a word that I use often when we do study conflict, even human interactions, and being transformational. And so I look at the First World War as very transformational, and there is a lot of positives and negatives that go into it. All right, and so hopefully, you process a little bit of what you think that one word is, and you can put it in the chat if you would like to. One little local connection in that little clip, I believe it's Uhura Williams, and again, I may be mispronouncing his first name, but I also attended a live streaming symposium that he had put on as well. He is currently a professor at the University of St. Thomas in St. Paul. So when I see him in these clips, I'm like, okay, there's our local connection piece there as well. All right. So anyone have any thoughts or any questions? Just from that little clip here on one word. The one historian that referred to the First World War as, stupid. I mean, I would sit in his classroom and I'd be kind of curious. It's like, let's expand on that. Let's dig into it here. All right. So your assignment that you should have finished up yesterday is the causes, and looking at that activity. What can we arrive at as really probably the most important, or of that list, what kind of stands out as, the key cause that just gets it all going? And looking at it, does it weave itself into some of these other ones? What kind of pops out there? Again, you can put it in the chat or on mute. All right. So one thing I look at, and this is where, not that I want to hear myself talk and all that stuff about my own experience and such like that, but I go back to my history degree at the University of Minnesota, and what is my historical or my history degree emphasis in, and it's diplomatic history. So I'm looking at those causes that in some ways show diplomacy, and perhaps diplomacy in action, good and bad. All right, so I see the alliance system, definitely the alliance system and the entangledness of it. That's huge, because by 1914 we kind of set if this is the playground or if this is the courtyard, we know who is on whose side. Well, almost we do, because we know the Italians, they back out of their alliance with Germany and Austria, and the Ottoman Empire moves in. But the alliance system and how reckless the alliance system is becoming. It started off being defensive, but they become very offensive in many cases because of the nature of those agreements. So the alliance system is big. I would agree with that. And that, the July crisis, I really do place a lot of emphasis on the July crisis and in the failure of diplomacy to work in finding a solution. It almost gave the impression that maybe they didn't want to find a solution. Anyone else? Anyone else? Because I would like to build on that July crisis moment that spills into August. Anyone else?
What I said was I thought that the First World War was caused by a culmination of all the tensions in Europe between the various different countries, because the tensions in Europe had like been rising for years now, like especially in areas like the Balkans, and then the colonialism in like Africa and imperialism. And so a bunch of countries entered different treaties with each other that were kind of loose and unorganized, it seemed. And then eventually just all the tension boiled over and started the war.
All right. I think that's a really good response. And, you know, Tyson, I would say that almost sounds like a good intro to a history paper in how you articulated your thoughts, which also then speaks a little bit to, again, this idea of historiography. Orthodox historians, they want to point the finger at Germany as and their behavior, and we can analyze their behavior and look at it and say, yeah, you know, they are aggressive. And revisionist historians would like to point the finger really at nations like Great Britain. But then you have your post-revisionists, and their ideas would be very similar to what Tyson was saying, but looking at there really isn't one specific cause. It's multiple causation here at it. And one of those post-revisionist historians is Stoessinger, and he had wrote a book, Why Nations Go to War. And, you know, he talks about that there is all these factors playing a part here, but he does highlight personalities and how egos of the Kaiser and the Tsar and of the Emperor of Austria, how those egos in some ways really impacted rational decisions. And then listening to their subordinates who were very rigid in their plans, you know, those war plans that were being created, and also having personal motives in there as well, all come to play. So we can see here that maybe the guns of August didn't need to come firing if a little bit more diplomacy would have happened then, as well as going back to the 19th century and perhaps addressing the causes of the tension, as opposed to looking at gains in dealing with addressing the causes. All right, so good discussion here with that. You know, the historians and people are going to be divided on whether or not this could have been avoided. But the big throwdown is going to happen in August of 1914. And the war is not going to be a short one, as many of them perhaps had hoped that it would be a short one, that it will spread out over a series of years, 1914 to 19. By June of 1919, you have the Treaty of Versailles in hand. All right. So anything that needs to get clarified from that activity? Actions by countries, questions about arms race and militarism and the alliance system. Did we learn anything new? What are you thinking about that? It's very well possible in your family tree that you might have had someone in your family that participated in the First World War, the Great War. Chance of them being alive is very slim, but very possible in your family tree that you have someone who has participated. And so, like on that slide, you see that doughboy, and that's the name for American soldiers. We are the doughboys. And that individual is one of two Hyder boys. And so I got to go on my mom's side of the family, who had signed up for the Selective Service draft because they had to, it's by law, you had to register, just like now. Every young man who's 18 or older needs to register. Back then, Joseph Hyder and John Hyder Jr. Had registered for the Selective Service draft, and it was John Hyder. So that picture right there is John Hyder Jr. He's 23 and he's from St. Paul, Minnesota, and he signed up, and he would be drafted. He would definitely be drafted. I always think it's kind of interesting on my mom's side of the family. John Hyder Jr. is a first generation German American. So, and the Hyders, they're German in descent, but they're from Austria. And John Hyder Jr., just like my grandfather, Adolf Hyder, had a good working understanding of the German language. So never really talked to him about his war experience, but I'm sure it was interesting, especially if he came across some Germans. Could have sparked some good conversation, maybe. I also, my great grandfather, Gustav Meyer, he was not a U.S. citizen at the time, but even in the Selective Service, citizens and aliens would need to register for the draft, and he registered for the draft, but he did not get drafted. All right, enough going down family lane, memory lane here. I want you to go to Schoology, please. So let's do that. Let's go to Schoology. And the assignment has been open for some time. And we're going to look at the war and how it is conducted. And overall, and it's called the total war activity. And overall, what we're trying to do is gain an understanding of the nature of the First World War. And this is a summative assessment, all right? And you are going to be able to work with a historical buddy here. And what we want to do here, when we look at cross-regional wars like the First World War, and we'll also do this with the Second World War, so you can anticipate next week we're going to have something similar to this in regards to the Second World War as we are with the First World War. But when we look at total war, and some of you may remember perhaps, in History Americas, I made a claim that the U.S. Civil War was like a total war. And so what does that really mean when I say total war? It's a term used to describe a war in which a country uses all human, economic, and military resources to fight and seek complete victory over the enemy. That's the goal here. That's what makes it a total war. And they have these components. And we find some of these components in civil wars, in limited wars, in revolutionary independence type wars. But when we look at a cross-regional war like the First World War, because how big it is, its time, its vastness of it, who's involved, we tend to say it's a total war. But let's see if it really is. Creating a large fighting force through the use of conscription. Now, conscription is another way of saying draft. Here in the United States, you know, we're going to probably put about 4.6 million doughboys in the uniform. And because, you know, we do not have a compulsory military service, we rely on volunteer participation, but we also passed the Selective Service Act. And so that's our form of conscription as well. Use of civilians in the war effort, for example, in industry and war at home. So we're talking about the home front. using all weapons available and developing new ones in order to ensure victory. I mean, this is a industrialized war, and it's very innovative on both sides. All right, and so they're looking for ways to kind of break that stalemate. All right, so we're talking about technology, air, land, and sea. Government control of key aspects of the economy in order to direct the war effort. All right, so again, we're talking about what is the government? What is the government of the United States, led by Woodrow Wilson? What are they doing in controlling the economy to make sure the war effort is going on? All right, or Great Britain, or Germany, France. Government control of the media in order to maintain civilian morale and influence how the people perceive the enemy. We're talking about propaganda here. And in the 20th century, mass media is being developed, and it's being used in the First World War, and definitely will be used in the Second World War. So we're talking about those propaganda posters. All right. You might have remembered, if you were in my classroom, I have the Uncle Sam poster. If I can bring it over, there we go, Uncle Sam in the corner. I want you for the U.S. Army. All right, that's propaganda, getting us to enlist, or ways to demonize the enemy as well. All right, and then targeting of civilians as well as combatants in the quest for total victory. Just like in a civil war, in the First World War and definitely the Second World War, the differentiation between civilians and combatants gets a little blurred. In this war, we will have acts of genocide happening. Okay, some of us might know that as the Armenian genocide, and if we can remember from our first unit of study, leading into looking at Rwanda and Kosovo, mentioned about the Armenian genocide. So your objective here, all right, so this is a big task. It's like, okay, I'm talking forever, but it's important. You're going to research and analyze to what extent World War I was a total war. And you can work with a historical buddy here. That means no more than 3. Oh my gosh, this is huge. All right, 3. All right, normally I just say you and a historical buddy, but here we got a triumvirate perhaps, or you can go solo. That's fine as well. If you are working with historical buddies, just be safe as you're doing it. Use chapter 3 in our textbook, so you really shouldn't have to GTS stuff. Just pull the information out of chapter 3. All right, what you need to include, there are kind of like 3 big overarching themes here, concepts I need you to focus on. Theaters of war, role of civilians, and the growth of government. All right, so just like up here in the definition, here it is. And flesh this out for all 3 theaters. You want to focus on the type of fighting, the use of technology, and the influence of the outcome of the war. All right, so war on land. Okay, we know there are a number of fronts out there, the Western and the Eastern Front, Western Front, trench warfare, all that stuff. All right, but we got to think about the type of fighting that goes into it, the technology, and did it really change the outcome of the war? Okay, war at sea. Again, here we've got the dreadnoughts, but did the war at sea really play a part here? I know we have the things called Unterseebooten, or submarines. Maybe they change outcome. And then the war in the air, airplanes, Zeppelins, all that stuff is being developed here. Role of civilians in the war. War comes to the civilians. So some of it is the impact of the fighting on civilians, and in what ways is that going on? Impact of economic warfare on civilians. You know, how is that happening? You know, blockades. Women as part of the war effort and uses and acts of genocide here. And then the growth of government, it's expanding pretty much is what we're talking about. Controlling human resources, you know, what's the reasoning behind that? When we say human resource, we're talking about the labor. We're talking about labor here. Controlling of the war production and the ways they did that, and controlling the morale, the use of propaganda, and controlling the economy. How are they paying for the war? How is Uncle Sam going to pay for this war? All right. How is the King of England going to be paying for this war? How is the Kaiser of Germany going to pay for the war? Stuff like that. And lastly, you want to respond to the big historical question: in what ways can World War I be considered a total war? All right, this is one where you pick your grade. Pick your grade. Choose your finished product here as well. Of course, I'm expecting good things if you're shooting for that A, but there are a variety of ways to do it. Okay, and if you are working with historical buddies, you need to decide what's your format and then how you're going to put it together. All right, you can see you got a podcast, iMovie, Adobe Spark Video. I need to hear your voice. And I know some are going to say, Mr. Newcomb, I can do my voice over Google Slides and PowerPoints. Fine, go ahead and do that. That can vault it up into the A category as well. But usually what we're looking for here is like, with the iMovie and the Adobe Spark Video, you can put some imagery in it. The platform's a little bit easier to put your voice in it. Or you can go social media format. You can do Twitter, Instagram, posts and all that. You can create a serial box, just take pictures of the panels in order to submit it. And of course, visuals, got to have visuals. The B is more about presentation format, the Google Slides, PowerPoint, the Adobe Spark page, all that stuff. I just don't hear your voice, and we're not presenting the class anyhow. Visuals though is needed. And then for the C, it's about creating some type of graphic organizer, all right, which can easily be done as well. All right, but this is summative. Right now I have it tentatively set for Thursday. And I'll check in periodically to see how we're doing on it. I'll take some class time, obviously, on Wednesday and Thursday as well to kind of see where we're at on this as well, and just bring in some other points about the war to help expand on the totalness of it. Whew, talking for a little while here, very fast, very furious. Do we have some specific questions about this? We understand the parameters of it, hopefully. If we understand that it is due Thursday, and this can be collaborated. Okay, so at the moment, it doesn't seem like we have any questions or concerns. I will leave this Google Meet open for Q&A. You can stay on for that. If not, leave and have a great day.